Matt Roweeder from Arctic Wolf. He's a manager of commercial sales engineer, and he's going to be talking with me today about this topic. How you doing today, Matt?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, David. Usually I'm just on calls that are maybe voice, so I usually say I have a voice for print media, but this time I get to say I have a face for radio and a voice for print media here. So
I often say I often say the same thing, so I can appreciate where you're coming from on that one. So I wanted to remind everybody that has joined us, if you haven't joined us before, we are live. So feel free to, if we're on YouTube and LinkedIn, feel free to chat us your questions, and we'll do best to answer those questions live here on the air. So with that, Matt, why don't you tell us, just take 2 minutes here and tell us what you do for who Arctic Wolf is and what you do for Arctic Wolf.
So Arctic Wolf is a cybersecurity, I guess we focus on security operations. For what that means for us is really doing managed detection response at a very broad level, managed risk, which is vulnerability scanning, managed awareness or user training, but doing so in a way that brings together all of those things into a centralized platform. And most importantly, keeps humans in the mix as a part of it. So I think as some of the topics we'll actually discuss, talk about AI and other things, everybody tries to solve this problem with technology, and we do that as well. But we don't want to lose humans as a part of the mix. They're still a very valid part when it comes to security. So Arctic Wolf has made that a large component or investment of what we do as we monitor people's environment and make sure they stay secure from an overall perspective. So that's a really top level view, but we're here to keep the people that subscribe to our service safe and not get hacked, et cetera, those kinds of things.
Certainly. And very important piece. I mean, with any security posture, you want to make sure it's not just one thing you need to put in place, it's multiple pieces. And as you mentioned, AI is becoming just such a huge topic these days that having humans, AI, because AI can look at things a human can't, machine language, just a lot of different things. Looking at your security posture can only be a good thing. So,
yep, for sure, you need it all. Defense in depth. Utilize the tools that are available both to us and to your customers from products, et cetera, because we know the hackers are not going to quit developing and trying to up their game, right? So we need to do the same on our side, which is where we come in strong and help our customers out.
All right. So to that end, today's conversation is a security topic, and we're trying to get out our crystal ball here and look at some trends, what's happening leading up to this point, and try to make some predictions for 2024 for cybersecurity. So we'll talk about some people may have been thinking about. Over the past year, we've given a lot of, on NCI Live here, we've done a lot of topics about cybersecurity, whether it be topics about the security itself or products that have been brought to bear against security. But let's look at now and going forward, starting with one topic that has come up. I would say it's been a topic that it's just been on and off and on and off and on and off, but it's been brought to bear. And especially this year, it's going to be a huge one. It was 2 years ago, and now 4 years ago, then 2 years ago. Now this year, I think it's going to be probably the biggest topic. And that specifically is election security. And it's not something more specifically election data security. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's an interesting phenomenon, and we've sort of seen this change over the years too, as different platforms, social media things change these things, and we've gone from regular ballots, right, to electronic types of ways of doing voter calculations and adding those things up, and so I think what we're going to see is more focus both from malicious actors and maybe even some of the parties involved, whoever they are, both trying to make sure they make the elections go a certain way. So both making sure what we're doing or how we're voting stays secure is of ultimate importance, right? So that people's votes count and they're counted correctly. That's of course important. But what we're going to see and more is more social media type interaction. I think where people get their news, where they see things can come from anywhere, right? And it could be real, it could not be. And so that's going to become larger and larger. So you need to be careful where you get your data from that you use to make your decisions. But also that's going to be a focus of foreign countries that want to use that to instill, whatever their agenda is. Utilize that as much as possible. And one of the things I think we're going to talk about a little bit is AI and see how AI plays into this equation with what can they do from a manipulating social media perspective, or some of these deep fakes, right? Where you can actually put people's faces and voices together and create videos, and they have to be debunked, or, what's real, what's not starts to become rather hard to decipher. So
that's a good point.
Very interesting.
That's a very good point about what's real and what's not. That plays into maybe the social engineering aspect of it.
Yep.
So just a little history. Many people don't know this about me, but for the last, well, up until I started here at Network Center, I worked in the state of California. I did consulting for one of the television stations out there doing election tabulation. So what would happen is the secretaries of state, the registrars of voters of the various counties would send the news stations their results, and they would do it electronically. So, but during that whole process, I got a new, deeper understanding and an appreciation for how that data was done. So the interesting part to me, and even these days, is the votes that are official, shall we say, are never transmitted over the internet, ever, ever, ever. They're not even on a network. They're good old-fashioned USB key thumb drive. Sometimes even the machines themselves don't have any ports on them. They're just by themselves, and they have to be exported to a printer and then counted that way. So they're very standalone, but that does not preclude social engineering.
I know in previous elections too, there has been talk of supply chain attacks too, where you try to get into the code that then gets put into some of those machines as well, right? So
very good point.
The two ways that is it going to be getting it? You got to get in early here, where you go into some of that and try to trickle your way into the actual device itself in the end, because you're right, it is very isolated by the time it gets there. And then using social engineering in some way, shape, or form to manipulate the public into thinking a certain way is something that is obviously going to be very important. And actually, one thing I think we might talk about later too is I've heard some rumblings now about these actual vendors having some problems getting cyber insurance because of issues, which one might be something we talk about. But there's a lot of things that are going into it. It'll be very interesting to see how all of this comes together, how AI plays a part into it, and we're certainly not alone here in the U.S. It's a global thing, right? So wherever there are votes, elections, etc., they're going to be affected by probably this as well.
Absolutely. No, it's that one, in my opinion, is going to be one that's I think is going to gain news attention because of its effects. If it affects here in the U.S., it affects a lot of people and has garnered a lot of news attention. So, all right, let's move on. Let's talk a news topic. One that was brought up to me was ransomware as a service. So you think that's going to get, first of all, what is it? And then second of all, do you see it going to be either just growing, or do you think it's going to explode in 2024?
We'll see what happens. And a lot of the information that I'm, divulging here actually comes from our threat intelligence team. So I'm not the one. I'll do some research, of course, but there are really smart people behind me that are also providing me a lot of information that I can go forward with. But what we've seen is more in just the last couple of years, and I think it's going to be a continuing trend, the commercialization, as it were, of ransomware. So that's where we get the ransomware as a service, right? There's now commercialized platforms that you use for doing ransomware. And it's become very transactional. Typically how it works is you have somebody who gains access. So they're calling them an access broker who gets into a business or something, right? So now they've got access to a certain business. They'll say, I'll sell you this access to an affiliate. An affiliate then says, okay, I'll take it. And I'm going to use this ransomware as a service platform to now commit ransomware across the environment here at this particular business. So we'll see how this plays out. The access brokers might start to create their own type of business where they have a platform, an access brokering. Maybe they even have one already, where you just sign in and say, I'll take this vulnerability for this business, and then they go to the ransomware side and they take the ransomware part and say, I'd like to, use these tools from these guys. And I actually got to see this. One of our incident response teams was chatting with one of the people on a ransomware as a service platform. They have their own chat platform, and they were going in and say, okay, we'll give you this much. And we were, negotiating down. And the guy was telling me what we usually do is put in a lot of stuff and feign ignorance and say, what do you need or what do you do? So we can buy time to do backups and restore things so that we can maybe not have to pay as much. But I think it's going to be more the commercialization of all of these things, from access brokers to the guy in the middle to the platforms, as they just become standard and more of a business.
I mean, it sounds to me like a whole commerce platform, like more or less forgive the term, stock market, or a marketing, a trade market, like an eBay of security, what do you call them? Security incidents. So you can basically go back and forth and say, hey, I want access to, okay, I'll sell that access to you for $50,000 in return, or in return, I want access to these four, and on and on and on. So that, it's scary, but by the same token, knowing about it is one way to defend against it. You could inject false positives, right? And be able to inject false access. And by doing that, they're like, hey, I didn't get my thing. So sorry.
Yep.
Find me. Go ahead. So
no honor among thieves, perhaps.
No honor among thieves. Introduce fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? FUD.
Yep. Exactly.
So
it's very interesting. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't think that's going anywhere. You get ransomed for your environment, and then they try to ransom the data, right? So first they get in, and they also exfiltrate all the data. So the other things they use to, coerce you into paying is, I'm going to release all your data as well, right? So holding that hostage and having that as something as a secondary bet to make you pay is always interesting. And I also just heard in the news that they found that one of the largest collection of all these breaches ever. It was just a huge amount of data from everything from the Yahoo breaches to you name it, ever since. That's in one place. And I was curious if that was maybe staging for some of these AI things we're going to talk about, or just we're looking at, right, where you take large data sets and you could figure out a lot about a person with all of these breaches. But it got my head spin.
That's interesting. Like, they in the AI conversation, like ChatGPT, the Copilot, and a few of the others, they have a large language model. That's an LLM. What if they have an LSM, large security model, or a LBM, large breach model? Oh, ouch. But cool, because then you could, no, I'm saying cool because, again, knowing of its existence is a key to that. So, yeah, but you'd have to train that set, and it's not about the data, because in those models, they're using a lot of different pieces, and those pieces don't always fit together, right? Words are just words, and so they fit together, and then there's syntax that goes along with it. But in security, they're kind of a collection of collections, right?
Yep.
I do find it fascinating, though, that's something to keep an eye on.
It was. I do. Yeah, there's definitely some hurdles there to make that actually usable by AI, or the current level of kind of the ChatGPT thing, based on what you're talking about. But it seemed like it's maybe a staging of data to see what can be done with it, how it can be accessed, where you could correlate the same person in multiple areas. And then just kind of thinking through if you could use that to, when you go in to sign up for something, it asks a bunch of questions about your former residences and your parents, or where you went to high school, if there would be a way where you take all this data, correlate it, and you could pretend to be that person.
Those public records are insane for that.
Yeah, you could potentially use that in many ways for good or evil, right? But I always like to think through, when these things happen, what maybe could be the end goal of some of these things, which given some of the larger, like you said, larger language models, and if it gets structured right, could be an interesting way to query data about people, maybe in a bad way, but which is why we got to continue to defend against it, right?
Yep. And with any AI or any of these pieces, it's all about the data set, not only about the model that you're using to query it with, but the data set that you are querying. So the larger the data set, the more relevant responses you're going to get back. So yeah, that's one I think also in 2024. That's a good one. I think we'll keep our eyes open on that one, see what happens. We were talking about it internally. I think the end of this year, we're going to try to do a recap and see how many of these things that we're talking about have escalated. I don't know, like come true would be the right word, but escalated to the point of, wow, they really were a thing that took off, or nah, wasn't as big of a deal. And then maybe there was something else completely unknown, came from left field, and we didn't think about it at all. So I'd be curious about that one.
Yeah, me
I
too.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I just said me too. That's always interesting to see, if people's predictions or thoughts about where things are going are accurate or close, or what came out of left field, because there's almost always something, right? So
Absolutely. I do want to take a quick interjection here and remind everybody that is viewing us live. Again, feel free to chat us here. We have definitely an expert in security here, so feel free to chat us those questions from LinkedIn or YouTube, and we'll do our best to answer them on the air. All right, let's move on to another topic. Well, we've kind of smattered in AI, kind of all over the place. I'm just gonna let's touch on it and then let's move on to another topic. What I want to talk about specifically here on the AI front is maybe the difference between the war, maybe is the best way to put it, between the AI generated attacks and the AI generated responses. So, what do you think is going to develop faster? Okay. And we kind of talked about some of this already, but what do you think that battlefield is going to look like?
Oh, that's a good one. I know both sides it's kind of like an arms race, right? Right now, where I think both sides are
Escalation.
tuning.
Yep.
I think what we're going to see is better detections with AI from a defensive standpoint. And this is maybe me being optimistic and working for the company I do, but I get to see a lot of the advances about our company and others when it comes to protecting people's environments. I think we will probably utilize it a bit better, perhaps, than the attackers when it comes to attacks from a technical perspective. I think attackers are going to use it better from a social engineering and spam and phishing perspective, better than we're going to be able to protect against it
Yep.
from there.
I've seen that.
So
yep, I've seen that in person. Yep.
yeah, the way I see it playing out is that's going to get better and it's going to start getting through more and more. But I think we'll have some detections in the back end to hopefully catch it when they do get in. That's kind of the way I see it playing out, just based on how much money and people are being poured into all this from our side. I know it's probably getting some attention, maybe not as much from the other side, but that's my guess, and maybe that's me being a little optimistic. What do you think, David?
Well, my thoughts, or what I've seen just so far with the AI models and things that has been applied to security, is you've heard the term script kiddies. Yeah. People that are literally just downloading some script from the internet and maybe modifying it and then saying, hey, I wonder if I can attack the Pentagon with some free script. Not happening, Captain. No, sorry. But the idea of that is that they have this script that they just downloaded, grabbed it, and they're going to try it. I think that in that instance, the idea of a script kiddie is going to be elevated to the next level, because they can say, write me a script to do X, and it will be an intelligent script. So you can, AI is as good as its inputs, right? And its data sets. So if you're able to enunciate what you want it to do and how, AI has all the data and all the programming resources and everything. You could say, write me a Linux shell script that will do this, avoiding these ports, and as a back shell. I mean, all of that. You can have it write that, and that script will be a lot more technically advanced and adaptive and various other things. So that's one thing I see, or maybe predict would be a better word. I also see, the idea of a botnet, being able to read, again, reading large data sets and having the ability to adapt. Think board.
Sure.
right? You Star Trek, think Borg. They recognize something, and then they have something for the data set to add to the data set. Like, let me pull from this, and here is the most likely. You can say, show me the most likely, and this is how you would query an AI. Say, show me the top 5, attacks that are most likely to work against large networks. And you can write scripted AI queries. You write those queries, and then those queries can then update the data set. In theory, there's a lot of theory here, so I have to stretch before I reach that far, but bear with me. So I can see that being a potential, but whether it's reality or whether it comes to fruition, I guess it depends on how, just like anything. I never say that it's like if you get attacked, it's always when.
Yep.
When that is the determinant factor. And always put the measure of security in place based on what you have to protect and how long it will take you to reproduce that data, that information, that resource. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, that's what AI does. I completely agree with what you're saying, and it sounds like it's going to be very accurate, right? It's those things a human would usually do, given the data they're reading or seeing as it occurs, could then have some sort of intelligence doing the same thing. A human would go, well, this happened. Well, I should go to this because I know how this works. And right now, that stuff probably isn't as smart as it could be, but adding that in there and taking the human out of some of it certainly automates it, makes it that much easier. And if you're not doing the same thing on the defensive side, it's going to be rough to stop some of those things as well. So
it's like every tool that we invent, right, for digital and information has that much more efficiency. It doesn't replace the human element. It just gets us orders of magnitude of efficiency. So for example, go back to, I love using movies as analogies. So go back to War Games, right? He had a old Altair system hooked up to a modem, and it was literally dialing one at a time. And then it was trying text passwords. All the software he had was an auto dialer. And then you go on to like the movie, what was the Sneakers, and we went on to that movie, and then they're dialing phone. I'm using that in that case. They bounced the relay off of 6 satellites and did a bunch of other stuff. Then they went to there's hackers in the movie where they're going through internet relays and a bunch of other stuff and getting into systems and having the internet was one of the things that truly gave hackers the power. And a hacker isn't even a term. Threat actor is now the thractor.
Ooh, there we go. New term.
I just invented a word. You heard it here first. Thractor.
Patent pending. Patent pending.
Patent pending. No, copyright. Copyright.
Copyright. That's the one.
Yeah,
that's the
copyright. One. Or TM, depending on if we make a nice little logo on it.
All the above, just because.
Yeah, thractor. Well, that sounds like tractor, so maybe that's not a good thing. Anyway, so now again, that's a tool that you can now collaborate with others that are like-minded, going after the same organization. So the idea of a brute force attack is much more common, much easier to perform. So now we have AI, which can now pick and choose targets. It can go based on data that it receives. So just more and more tools that escalate the efficiency.
So. Slightly off topic, but I have one question, David, your thoughts. I don't know if you've looked into this or much, but I've been worried, maybe not worried, but thought about this for many years. It's quantum computing. When you add it into some of these things, right? Where if you've got AI that adds a lot of magnitude to what a human or something could do, and quantum computing takes computing to a level nobody's even really used to right now. It's going to be interesting how we adapt there. I don't want to digress, but as we start thinking about this, that's one thing where there's a lot of things we're going to have to think about when we get to that point, because there's going to be just a lot of compute and smartness that can take over things here. But if you have thoughts on quantum computing, it's something I always think about because it's going to change the game next, I think, after AI, but it's still pretty new, and I don't know how many people have actually dug into that.
I've dug into that quite a bit. I've dug into that quite a bit, and I, for one, welcome our new machine overlords.
Exactly.
No, quantum computing, part of the problem with quantum computing at this stage, I think we're about We're several years away from quantum computing, primarily because of our current computing model of software hardware. And right now, quantum computing, at least at its stage right now, doesn't have the idea of interfacing, having a human interface that is usable. It can do binary calculation. It's not even binary. It's, I don't know how to put it.
It's done at the atomic level, right?
It's at
Like
the,
very
and it's
small.
it's
Insane.
stateful spooky action at a distance. And we could go down this rabbit hole for hours. There's no one single sentence that summarizes quantum computing. But what I can say is that we're a few years away from that. But by that time, AI will be mature. And if we have the software layer really mature and the hardware layer is, coming to fruition, you could combine those two and have a really powerful setup.
I think that's called Skynet, right? And then it takes over.
I did ask ChatGPT a few months ago when it was first really exploding. I did ask it. I said, now, are you going to turn into Skynet um, and take over the human race? Interestingly enough, it came back with a response. Not what is Skynet. It came back with a response that said, I am only a language model and I can only respond to the queries that I'm given based on data. However, there was the however that got me. However, we have a ethical framework that we use to prevent the responses from doing anything harmful or saying anything harmful. So, and there was a set of, like, I think it was 10 rules. Some of them were based on Asimov's rules of robotics, if you're familiar with those. And there was a few others. I don't remember all of the rules, but it was interesting. The fact that there was a however, though, is what went.
You're saying there's a chance.
You're saying there's a chance, exactly. Well,
yeah, well, we're still a few years off. That's probably the next generation.
You know what? That's good. At least I've got that. Well, listen, we've really blown through a half an hour here, and that's about all the time we have. So I really, this has been a really great conversation. So I really appreciate you coming by. I wanted to remind everyone that if you want to get more information on that, you can feel free to email us at info@netcenter.net. You can also check out our website at www.netcenter.net. You can also look for us on any of our social media pages, or come back and join us. We go live approximately every 2 weeks at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And we'll have new topics, and we do post those topics on our social media as to what we're going to be talking about. So, as I said before, Matt, this has been very entertaining and very fun to talk with you about these topics. Interested in coming back sometime?
Oh yeah, definitely. Anytime. This has been fun for me. Don't get to do it that often, but I'm happy to do it whenever you guys are willing to allow me to. So appreciate the time today.
No, this has been great. I do appreciate it. So, and for those of you that's joining us, thank you for joining us here on NCI Live. We'll talk to you next time.
Have a good one, everybody.